Welcome everybody. Okay. I'll give it a couple seconds. It looks like we just went live, so I'll let people trickle in. Welcome, welcome. All right, we'll get started. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us at the Fandango International Film Festival. We are excited here today to have two amazing panelists for the film Fandango at the Wall. My name is Allason Leitz. I'm a cinema manager and a programmer at Maysles Documentary Center most of the time in Harlem, in New York City, as well as a part of the team at Yole Africa in Goma, which is a cultural center. There are many fabulous things as well coming up for the remaining time of this festival, which goes until November 14th. And so we certainly hope that you will join us for the rest for any other events coming up. With us today, however, are Arturo O'farrill, who is the founder and artistic director of Afro-Latin Jazz Alliance. He's also a professor at the Herb Alpert School of Music at UCLA for Global Jazz Studies and Associate Dean for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. In addition, he's also a pianist, a composer, and educator. He was born in Mexico and grew up in New York City and received his formal education at Manhattan School of Music, as well as Aaron Copland School of Music at Queens College. He has played with the likes of Dizzy Gillespie, Harry Belafonte, and is a teacher in numerous other institutions, as well as a Grammy Award-winning artist in his own right. So we are more than grateful to have you with us today. In addition to Varda Bar-Kar's, who is the director of today's film. She has a childhood which spanned a myriad of countries, gifting her with an eclectic embrace of humanity, which I'm very excited to ask you more about. Her work explores the human condition in unexpectedly uplifting ways. And she recently completed Fandango at the Wall and has had numerous other successful films, which we are so grateful to have you both here. So thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I wanted to start off with a quote from Fernando, who is one of the featured speakers or featured protagonists in the film. He said, "They planted my mixed roots in the chapel of the Rosary on the side of the sanctuary of the Good Voyage of Christ. That's where my heritage comes from. I'm indigenous, I'm Black, Andalusian. 4 paths, 1 cross. I'm the jungle, the sea, the river. That's where my song comes from ancient Veracruz." And I wanted to start with that because something about this film that really resonated with me was the just like internationalness of this story. It was so local in some ways and in other ways really played itself out. And there was people from all over, cultural influences from all over, as I think you point out in the film. Veracruz is really the only place where there's even where there's like African influence in terms of musical history and culture. And something that, so I guess as both of you having also these sort of international backgrounds as it be, I was wondering if you could I wanted to frame this conversation within that. And I also wondered if we could just get started with you maybe telling us a little bit about what attracted you to the story and how you got involved. I know, Arturo, you were involved from the very beginning, but Varda, I would love to hear from you.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's true. I was born in England and lived in Israel. And my mother is South African. My father was Romanian. So I'm very mixed. By the time I was 10, I'd lived on three different continents. So I do very much identify as an immigrant. And I have the advantage of, presenting in a way that, makes me feel like I, integrate quite well. I do have a strong sense of being from somewhere else in another country that I can't shake. So I've kind of learned to really appreciate and value diversity, value what all different people bring to the United States. And so when so I very much relate to that line. In fact, I can't hear that without crying. I find it so moving and so relatable and so hopeful, that line that you just read, that of Fernando's poem, because it shows our interconnectivity. It shows how we are all related. We're all brothers and sisters, no matter where we come from. We do share this common humanity. We're on this planet together. We were all in this mystery, not knowing who we are. We all have to live our life having no idea, like, what it is, how we got here, what it is to be human. So we're kind of all in it, kind of fumbling around, trying to figure it out together. That's the reality. That's the truth. Mm. And the illusion or the lie is that we're separate, that we're different, that we need to protect each other from ourselves, kind of like the tribal mentality of, I'm not saying, I think it's wonderful that we have our unique heritages and our unique cultures, our unique voices, that we look different. It's not that, but that's the contribution. But we don't need to separate from each other. We don't need to fight each other. There's no need for it. We're just creating it. It can be anything. So I'm all for cooperation, collaboration. So when I heard about this project, a fellow filmmaker told me, "Oh, I know someone is looking for someone to film a festival at the border between the United States and Mexico." And right at that time, I was feeling especially saddened, I guess you could say, by the families being separated. I'd been walking the streets. I built a sign, that I was like kind of walking the streets, despairing at what was going on, not knowing what to do, and I really wanted to make a film about this. So when I heard about this disaster, that they were looking for someone to film this festival at the border between the United States and Mexico, and it was a music festival, I just thought, this is it, and within a few days, I was speaking with a collaborator of Arturo's, Kabir Segal, who's the producer of this project and the producer of the album. I jumped on to do it. I hope that answered your question.
Definitely. Definitely. And I'm happy for this to sort of be a discussion and informal in the sense of informality. As informal as a Zoom discussion can be, I suppose. But so Arturo, if you want to jump in.
Sure, I'll jump in. I wanted to comment to something that came from that Guadarrama quote, Fernando's quote, and that is it's also Latin America is a really strange place, because it really does come from it's one of those places that has indigenous blood mixed in with African blood, mixed in with European blood. And so it's a very specific kind of intermingling that I think that takes place, a very, very specific world that comes into proximity in Latin America. And it's very confusing at the same time, because Latin America is also very class conscious and very race conscious, and people don't know that. People, or maybe people do, but it's being aware of the fact that we are interconnected by blood, by culture, is not enough. It's also really looking at the face of one another and seeing each other in each other. So I think Fernando makes it really incredible, because all the forces that he talks about were opposing, the Christian crusades, the indigenous blood. These were all opposing forces that found their ferment in Latin America. And yet he's claiming that he's part of all those forces. So a lot of people would look at that and think, wow, that's really contradictory. It's not. As a matter of fact, what's really beautiful about what Fernando says is that we are our enemy and our friends. In each other's faces, we see the solution to all of life's contradictions and all of life's struggles. And when you can look at somebody who is your enemy and see your face in them, that humanizes that. That's no longer an abstract. That's you. You can't hate yourself. And so I really love, and I also weep when I hear that, and I weep every time this man speaks anyway. But I mean, the truth is that you can't hate yourself. You can't look at someone and see yourself in them and hate them. And so it's like brutally important that we recognize that as Varda was saying, we are so inexorably tied to each other in so many ways, in our DNA, in our music, in our culture, and in particular, the music of that is called Afro-Mexican, that is uniquely found in Veracruz, is also a picture of the journey of jazz and the journey of African folklore, and it's also a picture of that that ancient trade route, that spice route that begins in the Middle East and India, Middle East, then the tip of Spain, the north of Africa, the west of Africa, then makes its way to the New World, that makes itself up into what we call the Americas. And it's funny because all of it is it's vital to see that culture is global. It's vital to see that the music that emanates from somewhere in the Middle East is directly tied to the music of jazz, is directly tied to the folklore practice of the Mississippi Delta blues. It's all part of something that is so, and so you can't really hate that. You can't really define yourself by these integers, and that's I think such a vital part of that poetry. This all kind of came to be, as Varda was telling you. I made several projects with Kabir Segal. We've worked on 6 recordings, and so we were having dinner together, and somebody had sent me an article about Jorge Francisco Castillo, who is the founder of Fandango Fronterizo, which is the festival that is held at the border of San Diego, San Isidro, and Tijuana, and I read this article and I was blown away, man. I think I even cried when I read this. It seems like I cry a lot, doesn't it? It's okay. I won't cry. I won't cry in this at this panel. I promise.
We'll forgive you.
So I read this article and I just loved. I love this. I love this activism. I love the idea that you could take the very elements, the chain link fence, the chicken wire, the attack dogs, the border guards, the rifles. I would love the fact that you could take those elements and use them and kind of like melt them, synthesize them into the very, very conduits for community and love and peace and song and dance. And so I said to Kabir, I said, man, this is a beautiful thing. We should do this. We should go and record them, or just go there and see what happens. And so when we started talking about it, we were just going to go to the border and kind of do a concert there. And then all of a sudden it became a collaboration with the Son Jarocho musicians. And then we decided that it would be a wonderful thing to film, and we were blessed to have Varda enter into that flow, into that campfire that we were building. And we met Jorge Francisco Castillo. We went to Tijuana and learned about the music. We went to Veracruz, and you know the story. But the thing that's beautiful is that and Varda talks about this so eloquently, is that it's an idea, and an idea goes from one person's head into another person's head, and that person takes that idea and sends it into someone else's brain, and it literally is like. There's a beautiful ceremony at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, and it reminds me of the process of making this film. I don't know what the festival is. I'm not a good Episcopalian, but there's a beautiful window called the Rose of Sharon that faces south, and a particular time of year in New York City where it's called Stonehenge, Manhattan Stonehenge, and what they do is they turn off the lights until the only last remaining light is the light that's coming through this gorgeous. If you don't know the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, you can put the Statue of Liberty in it. It's this incredible cathedral. And so all the lights are off, and the last ray of sunlight comes in through the Rose of Sharon, and a single candle is lit as the light fades. And then that candle lights another candle, lights another candle, lights another candle. Before you know it, all the people that are there have lit candles. And that's what I think love is. That's what I think this film is. That's what I think light and life and love is all about.
Yes, speaking of things that travel with through love, or however you want to categorize it, something that struck me throughout the film, and I think is sort of integral to the story, is the extent to which music is something that can't be trapped inherently, right? And it can't be kind of segregated, or I don't know if that's the right term, but by this wall that we see. I got shivers at the end in that last scene where he's like somebody's trying to get, one of the musicians is trying to get their bow through and he's like, well, I can't give you the bow, but like it is insane, like the sound will travel through this wall, right? And I thought like it's such a metaphor in and of itself that the music can travel through the wall, even through places that we can't travel, that our voice can travel to places where we can't physically go, right? And I think in a historical context as well is fascinating. I mean, as you mentioned, the sort of illustration of
we found out something so distressing in the process of these film panels, and it was that when he first began this festival 13 years ago, the mesh was much wider. And the mesh itself was actually much wider, and over the years the mesh kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and so the you can barely fit the tip of your finger through the mesh now, and it made me sad, because he said it does actually get harder to hear acoustically what the person on the other side of the wall is doing. But I believe with perfect faith that if you made that wall out of steel and there was no opening, the music would cut through it like a razor blade anyway.
And what occurs to me also, and I think it's why I love music so much, is that it also breaks through like skin. Like it really like goes right into your heart. Like it goes right into, for me, if I'm down, like if I need music. I need music as much as I need food and water. I don't know if I would be alive without music. It is that powerful a force, for me. And I'm not a musician. For me, it's just, listening to it. I think it is something about, which is, I think, part of the reason I love working with music so much, because it's so important to me in my life. So I think that that's the thing about music also, is it really does get you like so deep. You can't resist it. It just goes in, and so I think that that's part of it also. It's not just the wall, the physical wall, but it's the walls that we have, in front of us that separate us, or in our minds, as we like to talk about as well.
You got me thinking about something, Varda, that is so beautiful. It also has to do with the idea that you can't trap music, because you can't really own it. You can't really hold it in your hand. It's something that happens in real time. You can own an iPhone and listen to MP3s, but that's not the thing that we're talking about. The thing is, music is a perfect example of that which is elusive, that which is transitory, that which is transient, as our lives are.
Yes.
And so in a way, the thing that makes music so unbelievably precious to me is the fact that it's but for a moment. It is not permanent, and that's what makes it precious. It's the idea that we don't own this. We don't own this vehicle. We don't own this earth.
Absolutely.
It's on loan. And so to me, the thing that makes music, and quite frankly all of the arts, to me, is the idea that it's this is stuff you can't own. It's a gift, and the gift has to be given and given and given and given, and you can't. There's a book I'm reading that's so awesome right now, because it talks about how a gift is not meant to be kept. It's called The Gift, and a gift is only a gift if you give it away.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is exactly what music and art and cinema and dance and song is all about. Transient.
I mean, even Fandango at the Wall, I like to say now, it was our film, but now it really belongs to the audience. Like we already made the film. Like it's not ours anymore. We can talk about it, but it has its own identity, its own life now, well beyond, us. We don't even know like whose living rooms it's been, whose bedrooms it's been in, what have people thought about it, what have people heard about, like it's all out there. We don't even know half of,
Yeah, especially these days. I mean, there's not even the sort of like shared space of a cinema that we're watching it in. And so it really is like spreading in a way that it hasn't necessarily, at least in this like style of film, how it had before. It's wild. Something that made me think of is, I think it's Martha Vega in the film, who talks about her definition of wealth. and how she had grown up with, you know, what would have like been categorized by the rest of the world in a poor situation, and yet she felt like she had grown up with all of the wealth. And I think Varda, you touched on this a little bit too earlier. Made me think about in regards to music. It made me think about Max Neef's hierarchy of needs. I'm forgetting his exact name for it, but he essentially has like a very different, the sort of quintessential Western definition of like what your basic needs are is like food, water, shelter. And Max Neef really goes into like music and like community, and we need actually all of these things to be a part of our lives, right? And I felt, or I was really struck by Martha's bringing that up and how she had experienced her own childhood. And I wondered if there was maybe in this film, maybe in another space, if there was a way or how that's been a part of your life, and how your definition of wealth has maybe changed or been affected by this film, or just been sort of formed throughout life in general.
That's a good question. You know, in addition to having lived in so many different places, I've also had 7 stepfathers and fathers. And some of them were multimillionaires. And so I've seen wealth. In fact, one of them I met Donald Trump. One of them was friends with Donald Trump when I was living in New York. And I knew and I witnessed it over and over and over again that money does not buy happiness. It does not. And my values are not, I don't do things, I know it's terrible of me actually. It's almost embarrassing to say, because we need money because we live in that kind of exchange, right? So there is a value, there is a place for capitalism, and I don't think money is inherently evil or anything like that. But I do believe that money is not God, money is not love, money doesn't do anything. It serves a purpose. We can have shelter, food, we can, but there's something much more valuable, and that is our, human connection, the richness of life, human beings, being with them, just the mysteries. There's just so much more else out there that is not money. And so I do very much, relate to what Marta said, and actually to what Thatcher said as well. Now my mother lives on a small island in Puerto Rico and doesn't have anything. And I have no inheritance. I had to pay for my own college, all of it. And I feel rich also. Like, I feel wealthy, the richness of my life. So I think there is a lot to what she said that we can learn from in the United States, because I think in the United States, we've gone off course in terms of our materialism and our value of materialism. And that's something I think we can really learn from Mexico, is the value of community, of coming together, of culture, of so many other things that are not money-based, that are not object-based, that we can't own, but that enrich our lives. So I think that's, very astute of you to notice that and to bring that out. That's, I think, definitely in the film, intentionally. Arturo, do you have something to say about that?
Yeah, no, it's I kind of recognize, as I've been going to Cuba sometimes 3, 4, 5 times a year for 20 years. And at the first couple of years I went, I couldn't quite figure it out. And over the time that I was going, I started realizing that Cubans are very, very, very poverty stricken, even during the best of the whatever it called, when there was actually a normalization. But and yet they are some of the most happy, beautiful people that I've ever seen in my life. And so I realized that I agree with Varda. The United States has an excess of everything. We have the best of everything, and somehow we are spiritual poverty. We have a great deal of spiritual poverty. And then here are these people who stand online for blocks to buy the most basic of sustenance. And it's our fault, by the way. And they are laughing and singing, and it's the same thing that I saw in Veracruz. It's the same sense, and it's the same thing that and by the way, this is not germane to countries or principalities. There are people down the block from my house who love each other and watch out for each other and guard each other's children, and they don't care. They work hard. They get up every day, and they work hard, and they don't make any money. And so it's. I mean, I'd like to say it's confined to localities and principalities, but it's a condition of the heart. And yes, those folks down there in Veracruz, first of all, they make the most unbelievable tortillas that you have ever seen in your life. And that's not the source of greatness. The source of greatness is that they then invite you to participate in the art of tortilla eating. and in the art of making music and dancing, and they do so freely, willingly, give all that they have of the little they have. And that's the secret. That's the secret, is that they invite you in and share with you what they have. And that's something that we are defined, not just in the United States. I hate to just blame the United States, but a lot of people, a lot of human beings in the world are defined by integers and metrics and deliverables and what you possess. And it's just, Varda's right. It's completely the opposite of life. The opposite of life is to share, to give. It's better to give than to receive. And again, it's like the idea of having, we've let that become the rule of our lives, and it does diminish us.
Yeah. I mean, and having said that, I know right now, especially with COVID, it's rough in Mexico, just like all the performers and all the artists here, the ones in Mexico suffering too. And, we want them to have enough money. And I don't want to make it seem like we're saying something's wrong with having money. It's just, it's like what Arturo said. It's the state of mind, and it's how you are in the world, how you engage.
I think the original statement is not the root of all evil is money. It's the love of money that is the root of all evil. So when people place that value over the value of being human, it's not money that's evil at all. In fact, it's very, very, very honest and real to be a good steward of what you have. But when it becomes having, it becomes more important than giving. That's to me the equation. That's when the equation gets really crooked. And I really also believe that this moment in history in the United States and the division that we feel is governed by this preponderance for having and owning. And if you just watch TV at night, you see 15 SUV commercials in 1/2 hour, 17 law firms, and then the 18 commercials for medication. It's just a constant barrage of have, buy, have. We're not defined by commodification. We cannot be. That is our spiritual poverty. We're defined by commodification. And the truth of the matter is that these beautiful souls from Veracruz who have not the means to commodify are teaching us that life is about very, very different values. And I think that's an amazing part of this film, too. I think you're muted.
Yep. Sorry.
Was that your dog?
That was my dog. He's very cute, but occasionally he decides that my housemate is an intruder and starts barking at him. So that's my apologies for that.
No, that's great. One thing I love about this era. I feel like I've been in Varda's living room. It's such a warm, inviting space. I feel like I could sit in that chair. I wouldn't rifle through your purse, though. I wouldn't do that. But I would love to sit in that chair and have a cup of tea with you. I feel like I already have. So that's one of the most beautiful things.
You're coming to dinner. I'm going to be cooking for you.
I'm sure you recognize that lobster buoy by now. And, it's just, I find that really beautiful about this era is that we do get to visit in each other's homes. It's not an informal stage on a panel somewhere in some fancy building, and I love that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think one of the things that, to bring it back to the film a bit, one more time. In the film, Arturo, you mentioned that where you say music is land, land is music, and it's not even just music, it's life. And I think that sort of encapsulates a lot of what you both were just saying, um, in just your experience of this, being part of this world in Veracruz. And I think in many ways, as you both said, what we're missing in this country right now in many ways is this sort of, I think I heard it said that one of the symptoms of capitalism is excess, and the other, amongst many more, is lack of access to process, like how things are done and how things are made. And I think that, like what you were saying about the tortillas, as much as I love a good tortilla, it just doesn't taste the same. I made some, funnily, recently, in myself for the first time. I'd never done it by myself, and I'm sure they tasted nowhere as good as the ones you ate in Veracruz, but it was such a different experience to like have really gone through this whole process of making things, which I think in many ways, in the sort of silver lining of the pandemic, I know a lot of people in my circles have reverted back to this, like trying to pass time by just making things. And I think it's a really beautiful lesson that people are taking out of this moment.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm a real believer in deconstructing elitism, and the idea that music is this rarefied thing, this special thing that special people do because they're trained to do it well, is just such a construct. And the thing that I was saying to Jorge in the film was that it's the earth and the stream and the wood and the chaneques in the woods that are as important to the music as the very strings of the jaranas. And one of the things, and that doesn't diminish, by the way, the incredibly complex beauty and artistry of these musicians and what they do. I mean, it's so ludicrous to me that we sanctify the arts. We even have that word, the arts, and you're supposed to get a halo over your head and supposed to share the arts, and you're supposed to access people to the arts, and these people are artists of the highest order. But the reason that they're artists of the highest order is that the simple act of picking up a guitar and playing it and joining with 7 other guitarists or 20 other guitarists or 30 other guitarists, or is not it's not a construct. It's the same thing you do when you make a tortilla or when you share your home with somebody. It's the integral part of working the field or being and so there's none of that barring elitism. In fact, it's funny because everyone's welcome to the Fandango, the Son Jarocho. Everyone, you don't need a ticket. We've talked about this. You don't need a ticket. You don't need to be good and incredible technically. You just have to be willing. You have to be willing to participate in the act, in the sacred act of sharing your culture with someone else. And so I think that is of the earth. That is taking the elements of the earth. And another way to look at it too is that these people make these beautiful instruments. The jaranas are made out of single pieces of wood, which is incredibly interesting to me. There's only 2 other places in the world where that's done. One of them is Puerto Rico, and the other one is Africa, where an entire instrument is carved from a trunk of wood. In modern guitar lute making reality, it's there's hundreds of pieces to some modern acoustic instruments, but the earth, the wood, the stream, the water, the tortillas, the assembly line of people making tortillas. It's all part of what he was talking about.
Yeah. And Ramon Gutierrez and Nacho Utrera, as you see in the film, are both luthiers. They both make instruments and they sell them, and you can actually buy them online. This is a good time to do it. And you can find them on Facebook. And their instruments are gorgeous. I have what's called a mosquito, which is a small one, which I'm now threatening to actually take out of the case and learn how to play. But they're beautiful instruments, and Sacho is amazing. He makes so many different things. It's unbelievable. And Wendy, we don't go into it in the film, but Wendy actually has a group where they sew. Sometimes I'll wear this beautiful blue dress that she made, but they make, they do beautiful kind of embroidery, and they make all sorts of things. So they're really connected. They really know how something is made. And you see their house, how gorgeous it is. I mean, they really can make anything. And I think that we can talk about rich and wealth. I mean, that's incredible to me.
Yeah, I have recently found an interest in like interior design and whatever as we separated out in this universe. And something that struck me was like, somebody was talking about how, each piece should have a meaning. And I thought, like, haven't we come full circle here? Like, wasn't the whole idea at the beginning when we had a home that it would include things that we like loved, but now we're like coming back to it, that like you should purchase. I mean, it's like a sort of warped understanding of it, I suppose, but like now you have to come back around and like purchase things that like you can associate some sort of meaning with. When I just thought it was kind of this like bizarre, ironic, like full circle kind of twist that we're making in many ways right now. I think though, Arturo, you were commenting on just like or both of you were like commenting on the making of these instruments and their I mean, I guess the like easiest way to sum it up that I can think of right now is like the fully roundedness of these individuals that you're following, or letting us into a little window of their lives from, I suppose is maybe a better perspective or word for something that like I found interesting, or I struck me a couple times throughout the film, was the kind of social interest and the like, for lack of a less commodified term, the social justice intentions of many of these musicians. And I thought it was hearing you kind of speak now again more about it. It's making me realize it's in many ways it feels to me like the Fandango and the San and all of that is it's more of a like lifestyle, for lack of a less cliche sounding way of saying it, but it's not just about, I think Arturo, you were saying like there's this sort of elitism and segregation of the arts in the West. I experienced primarily in my own life, and I think that what we got this sort of view into in this film, which I found was really beautiful, was this world in which that's not the case, and there's not this sort of distinction between caring for somebody's neighbor and where you buy your or where you get your food, right? Like it's something I've been struck by in the US, especially with these elections, is, people's very determined thoughts about like how they wanted the elections to turn out, and not seeing that like where they're getting their groceries or where they're getting their food or who they're buying their whatever from, whichever company they're doing that from, like that's an equal part of this game. And I think what I saw so beautifully in the film was just that, like a different example of that.
I remember being 6 years old and starting to play the piano. I remember being 9 or 10 and going to conservatory, and the message that I was sent was that I was special. I could play Mozart. And then as you go along the journey, you start to separate yourself more and more from human beings and think of yourself as a filmmaker or an artist or a student or a ballet dancer or whatever it is you do. You separate, and they just do this. And I know this is just part of the training regimen for all of us. So I'm really not putting it down, but I'm just saying that we start to separate ourselves out according to these cultural constructs that are so meaningless. And what ends up happening is that you start defining yourself by these things, and this again, by the grocery store you shop in. I have to have this kind of yogurt that they hand make in Tibet. Otherwise, I will not be able to enjoy my breakfast. It's kind of ludicrous, and the more they sell you this cultural and consumer elitism, the more you begin to define yourself by Whole Foods and and Trader Joe's and then you become this amalgamation of definitions of culture, and they manipulate that. Believe me, especially in times of political turmoil, you will identify yourself by what you wear, what you listen to, what social media you pay attention to, and the it's such a trap, and it's such a false construct. The truth of the matter is, I don't even like the idea of there being a specialist. Like, why can't kids make films? Why can't 90-year-old people pick up an instrument for the first time? Why can't, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's all like the specialization thing is so crazy, because, and that's again, it's very moving to me to see little babies and toddlers interact with things they don't know they shouldn't be interacting with. To see a kid sit down at a piano and go, to me that's the highest art, because it's the spirit of free play. It's the spirit of letting go and just injecting yourself into something that is a playground. But we've lost that because we need to partition and sectionalize and categorize, and so we lose that. We lose that spirit of free play, of entering into any situation fearlessly, because we don't want to be identified as somebody who is not very good or doesn't do that well.
Yeah, it's interesting also I don't know if you remember that Patricio talks about, he's sitting with his daughters and his wife, and he says, I'm not a teacher, I'm just a father, and the Sonorocho culture is it's everything. It's like what we eat, it's what everything. It's just there. I don't need to teach anything, because we're just living this. It permeates everything. So you're right. They're so committed, and it's you can see it. Like, if you study a frame in the film, let's say one of their homes, like especially like Patricio's house, I got to walk through it, and I tried to show it as much as possible. But like, every object is so aligned with who they are. There is no separation, and what they eat, and the music, and how they talk, and they are very. I think the daughters are kind of definitely influenced by pop culture. You don't see it in the film, but I've noticed that they're into that. We can't escape it. But there's something very thorough and complete about their commitment to that culture, for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I want to say, I'm sorry, I came off like a bit of an anti-European, anti-colonial. No, I think when Mozart played the piano, he was doing the same thing that Patricio does in his house. He was expressing his fullest self. You know what I mean? When you visit Patricia's house and meet his family, they live that. That is Sonorocho culture, as Viennese culture was during the time of Mozart, a very specific thing that expressed itself in a non-elitist way. And I think that my point is that the thing that makes Sonorocho so beautiful is that in a way it's almost reliving that natural synthesis of your art with your family and your earth and the whole experience. That reason Mozart was so badass is because that's what he did. That's how he could express himself, and it was free, and it was genuine, and it was direct from his heart. Same thing with John Coltrane and Albert Ayler and Patricio Hidalgo and Jimi Hendrix.
What about Charles? I was listening to Charles Mingus recently.
Charles Mingus is my hero.
Oh my God, it was so beautiful.
You absolutely now understood everything I do, because I'm a Charles Mingus fanatic.
I know, it's incredible, and and he just weaves so many different things into it.
That's borderless. That's exactly it. Charles Mingus was borderless, and he saw music as an extension of his humanity, which is what what we all try to do when we're in the right place in our lives. Yeah,
and what I think, what you were saying about the separation, like stars, like I'm this great filmmaker, I'm this great musician. I mean, the heartbreak of it all is that that person is separated. Now, I think that's why there's so much drug addiction, suicide, mental illness amongst people who are very accomplished, because suddenly they're separated. Like they no longer get to be amongst people. They no longer
Yeah.
get to, like the best part is that you get to kind of be,
Yeah.
kind of
No,
lazy back.
yeah, they define themselves by their craft. And therefore, they define themselves by the acceptance or negation of their craft, or how far, and it's just such a trap, because the quality of your art is not measured by a critics poll. The quality of your art is measured by how effectively you transmit what you want to say. And that could be done by an absolute amateur or the most polished, skilled virtuoso. How do you access information inside yourself and give it away? That's art. How you see things, how you filter things. Can you transmit them that way so that people really get a chance to go on that perilous journey that they would never go on themselves?
I want to get that written out.
Yeah.
I'm good at talk sometimes.
I want to read that.
But it's really funny because I'm teaching a class now in improvisation for classical musicians, and I find that 90% of that journey is to let go of the concept of expert.
Yeah.
That it's just 90% of that journey is like,
it's got to be play, right? It's got to be fun.
Yeah, it's got to be play. You can't think of it as right or wrong. If you think of it as right or wrong, you'll always be hampered in your attempt to express.
Well, I'm tempted to open up to a Q&A on that note. I think that's a great point, or beginning of the conclusion point. I'll ask one more question while we wait and see if there's any questions from the audience. I guess I'll continue from what you were saying earlier, which was you were talking about the music's or the sort of like the in the sort of vein of elitism, how like many of the musicians that you featured, had learned it from their grandparents, or they had learned it from their great grandparents, or like it had come sort of through this generational way. And I guess it really struck me, I think, watching the film, and this is maybe like a bit of a repetition of what we've already said, but it really struck me watching the film how much, how grounding it felt to like watch somebody embody something that their like generations before had done, and how in many ways we have this like freedom of, this like narrative of freedom, like you don't have to do what your parents did. And in many ways that's a beautiful thing, and in many ways I do something very different from what my parents do. And in many ways I'm very much aligned, but not in a way that would have historically been considered to be aligned. I'm not doing exactly what they're doing, but I do, I guess I wonder for the both of you, in whatever way, how you came to music, and if there are people in your lives who you've passed that on to, and if you could kind of speak to that part in your own lives.
I like to say that I became a musician despite my father, who was a famous composer, and that my sons became musicians despite me, because we just, that, it's really, it is kind of a notion of, it's hard for, it's a weird notion, the idea that people should do the same thing. It's not necessary, and you're right, it's beautiful when children do different things than their parents. But it's also kind of amazing to me when you can pass on the deeper values of your craft. So what I realized, for instance, and I'll just tell you a quick story, and then I'm going to get out of Varda's way because I know she's got a lot to say on this. I wanted to be I was a closet composer for my life and I started composing when I was a kid, but I wouldn't dare do it because I was the son of the famous Chico O'Farrill. And Chico O'Farrill was a revered name in Afro-Cuban jazz, and everybody told me he was a genius, and so I wouldn't do it in public. I played the piano very well, and I played my whole life, but I was afraid of being compared favorably or unfavorably to my father, and this is an absolutely true story. And so one day we were playing a performance at Alice Tully Hall with Wynton Marsalis, and I got home and there was a message on my machine. Somebody had left it with a fake British accent. They said, "Arturo Mohondiro, you are as stuffy as you look. Let it be said you don't have a 40th of your father's talent. In fact, I foresee you picking through garbage." So I looked at the phone and I looked at my life and I went, "Oh God, I'm still here. My pulse is still here. And everything's cool. I didn't die. I wasn't blown away by this thing that I feared my entire existence. And in fact, I'm not the kind of asshole who goes around making calls to destroy people." And it was at that point that I realized I'm not my father. Never was my father. I don't listen to him. I don't listen to the same music the same way he was. I could never do it. That's just every single human being should not be afraid of being who they are and the genuineness of what they do, whether it's familial or not. And that's the real journey because, I don't sound anything like Chico. And thank God both of my sons are extremely unique in their approach to music making.
Wow. That just shows you how important how we listen and how we hear is. You transform this potential, wound, like killer, into someone who gave you a gift, which is so cool. Because sometimes, you hear stories where, like when I went to college, I was studying acting. And I studied choreography. I started really in dance. I did make films all along since I was very young, but I really got into dancing. But then my mother insisted I go to an Ivy League college. So I ended up going to Cornell University, and there was no dance. There was only katakali dancing, which was like this form of Indian dancing, which I did do like over and over again, but you can only do so much katakali. I didn't even know there was not a dance program there. I thought there was going to be a dance program. So I ended up studying theater and acting. And there was this professor who came from Russia called Sergei Ponomarov. And he had been teaching circus in Russia, which circus was like really big in Russia and very well respected. And he had kind of got a little bit obsessed with me. And one day we were taking a walk and he turned to me and he said, "Varda, you know what?" He said, "You'll never make it as an actress." He said, "You're just too unique. Like you'll never incorporate. You're just too different. You're just never going to be able to get rid of the uniqueness that is you, and like separate it out to be an actor." And I really took it to heart. I really was like, after that, I did continue to study acting, but it kind of haunted me, and it gave me doubt, and it fortunately led me into directing because, I started to look at filmmaking and directing and, but it did shift me and it really it got me, like he wounded me. But I guess I did in a way also transform it into something else that turned out to be very fulfilling. I've always been an artist. I was born an artist. I've always loved to make things since the youngest of age. I remember when I was living in Israel, I would go to these empty lots and I'd find rocks and do sculptures and, like forever. That's how I've always expressed, and it's been in me forever. But my mother didn't want me to be an artist at all. Not at all. She appreciated that I did it, but going into adulthood, it was not to be. But interestingly enough, my uncle is a sculptor who lives in Corsica, a very accomplished sculptor and works in metal. On my father's side, my grandmother was an artist and a painter and a sculptor. So there's art in the genes and you just can't shake it. I think if it's meant to be, I think the only way you can be an artist is if you have no choice. I think if you have a choice, you're not going to do it. because it is so challenging on so many different levels. But I think, you know, there's something where you just, like, for me, I just have to do it. I have no choice.
And I
So
think
I don't know.
no, I just said that I think the lesson is that you're not defined by your past or your parents, but something of them or something of your upbringing, something of your surroundings and your environment guides your thinking. So that, and it's very apparent in the lives of these beautiful artists in Veracruz, because they are led by that culture. Here's the thing: they're led by that culture. It's not that they all become luthiers because that's what their fathers did. It's just a conduit for them to express who they are as a people. And so I don't think they see it as filial or I don't think they see it as matriarchal or to be. I just think they see that this is the path. This is the path that their culture flows upon. And so, and in a way, that's what you've done. That's what you've done, Varda. You didn't do exactly what your parents did, but that blood, that artistry ran through you. And even though I did exactly what my father does, it's on such a different level and such a different expression that you know. And I think again, it's like finding that that conduit in which your culture flows and expressing that as part of who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. You're right. Definitely growing up, I like with the Sonora artists, I was exposed to a lot of art. Art was very important. Culture was very important in my life growing up. Yeah, it's true.
All right, well, on that note, I'm gonna bring this to a close. It was so lovely to have you both with
It
us
was so
tonight.
much fun to spend time with you guys. It really was
Yeah.
incredible.
I feel like this Zoom world has brought this sort of like uncanny ability to have both of you somehow sitting on top of my desk, which obviously never would have happened in another world, but we had a wonderful chat.
Yeah. I got to tell you that a lot of people have seen this as a cursed period in our lives, and I've discovered nothing but blessing at every turn. And it's been, you know, in very harsh reality, but I think I've learned more in the past 5 months than I ever have in my entire life.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's interesting. We touched on so many different things and we didn't stay on the film, but I think that we delved into the themes of the film. And I kind of liked it because I want people to experience Fandango at the Wall in their own way. I don't, you know, like we made the film so that they can experience it. Talking about it, it's like pointing to the moon. You know, they say in Zen, you can either you can only point to it, but to actually experience it, you have to be in it. And I think to watch Fandango at the Wall is enough. I mean, we talk about it because we want to encourage people to watch it and we want people to get into it. But it, I think, is a complete expression. And so I kind of think it's cool that we got to speak about other things around it. And that way we kind of leave that untouched and let people experience it by watching it. And so I hope that if anyone's watching who hasn't seen it yet, that they do and enjoy it.
Can I riff on that for 1 second? Because I think you said something really beautiful. I would love people to see this film and walk away from it feeling like it just created a hunger for something, and that the film didn't answer. I would love for them to be able to see this film and go, wow, something that wasn't given forthcoming and realized for us by the film, but that we have to realize ourselves.
I love that. Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything else. I don't want to disturb. I want to thank the Monadnock International Film Festival for having all of us, for screening this film, this wonderful, wonderful film. And I look forward to hopefully everybody getting a chance to watch it and enjoying it.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you for having us. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And thank you, Deirdre.